As a mother, do we have traumas that are perhaps unresolved that our children are inheriting from us? Maybe not directly, but indirectly, they are experiencing the things that maybe we have not wrestled with. And it's also a really important question for us to think, is there a life void of trauma? And if so, can we actually do something about it to cut those ties from the traumatic experiences we have and use it as a source of wisdom for our children? And if so, how do we do that? In today's episode, I'm going to dive down into one of the leading psychologists, Erica, on her take on managing our trauma as parents and the importance of raising resilient children. My name is January Donovan, founder of the Women's School, where I train women with the mindset and skill set necessary to flourish in every arena of our life so that we can become a contribution towards truth, beauty, and goodness in our culture today. So let's jump right in. If you ask yourself 0 to 10, how resilient are you as a woman? What is your skill level? 10 being resilient, 0 being weak, not resilient at all, and a victim to your external circumstances. Resilience is something that we have to build with every experience. It's something that we acquire as a skill set. It's actually a compounding skill. And I'm going to break that down to you. Resilience, as we define it in the Women's School, is the ability for us to bounce back regardless of the external circumstances that are going on in our day-to-day busy life, right? If you think about it, is our life kind of a roller coaster that we are a victim to the things that are happening? Or are we that unshakable strength of a mother where economy, circumstances in the house, things not working out, we remain the unshakable pillar in our families, in our homes? And if we're not, why not? And I think that it's something that we have to ask ourselves continually, periodically, because I don't think that it's sort of a one and done. Okay, I'm resilient. Check that off the list. No, resilience is something that we have to build over and over and over and continually, like a muscle, that if we don't actually pay attention to it, it does become dormant, and we realize, well, I've become weak as a mom. I'm not as strong as I think I used to, and it's because we haven't paid attention to our capacity to become resilient. And I think the biggest motivation that we should have as women is that we want to raise resilient children. It's a universal desire for mothers. No one mother, at least, mothers who are really thinking logically about this, is going to say, well, I want to raise weak children, January, that are going to be a victim to every external circumstances, good or bad, that happen in their life. No, we want children that are strong, that are resilient against the negative influences, they're resilient against what's going to happen that are unpredictable in our culture. We want them to be the steady, unshakable force that's not tempted to lower her standards and do what is noble and right, regardless of the circumstances, where she remains peaceful, joyful amidst chaotic circumstances. No mother will say, yes, I'm going to pass on that. We obviously do. But what we have to think about is that we can't teach something we haven't possessed ourselves. And if we truly desire to raise resilient children, then we have to be able to look from within and say, what is my resilient level? And so let's jump right into Erica's kind of commentary. And I'm going to break it down because I think it's important for us to look from within. And really what we do in the Women's School is we are taking responsibility and ownership in our development of our mindset and our skill set. We can't keep blaming things that are outside of our control. What we can control is the development of our skill set and the development of our mindset, the expansion of becoming an excellent version of ourselves. That's the only thing that we can control. And I think that that's us cultivating the gifts that God is giving us and not taking that for granted and not making excuses to become a woman of excellence, to become a mother who is rooted in a life of excellence, which is ultimately what virtue is. But more importantly, it's in the life of excellence that we are really going to flourish. So it's not one or the other. It is integrated. It goes hand in hand. And because we want to flourish, meaning that we want to have more life in our life, we want to have peace and joy and harmony and abundance of resources, great friendship, quality relationships, an inspiring marriage, we all deeply universally desire that. And I think it's because God designed us to flourish as women. But in order to flourish, we have to develop our mindset and skill set. It just doesn't happen. We have to earn the skills to flourish. And I think that's where we have to diet our old current skill level and be very intentional about developing a a new woman every single day. Every single night that we lay in bed, we can reflect an examination of our conscience and say, how can I be better in my capacity to bring forth truth, beauty, and goodness in this world? How can I be better in my communication? How can I be better in the way I hold myself accountable? How can I be better in the words that I use? How can I be more faithful to God? How can I become a better steward of my time? How can I be a better steward of our country? These are things that we have to busy our mind, because ultimately we all have a mission that God has placed in our heart that is unique to us and us alone. No other woman is replicable. We are an irreplaceable, unrepeatable human being. Therefore, what we offer this world, no other woman can. And so what we have to do is to be training ourselves to become that resilient woman so that we can fulfill our purpose as mothers and also as contributors to society. So let's jump right in.
Children need mentally healthy parents. They need parents who are self-aware, sensitive, and empathic.
Children need mentally healthy parents. There was a study that was recently done by Doris Bauman on fulfillment, which stated that mental health is not separate from fulfillment. They were studying the fulfillment journey of a bunch of men and women, realizing that why are so many people today unfulfilled? And what she concluded is that fulfillment and mental health is actually intertwined. So what we have to ask ourselves is, how fulfilled are we as women in the different parts of our lives, in our friendship, in our marriage, in our home life, in our careers, in our bodies, in our mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual health? How fulfilled are we that we become mentally healthy? And I think that's an important question that maybe we might not even have asked ourselves that question. Am I fulfilled as a woman? Am I fulfilled as a mother? And if so, why am I not fulfilled? And what we do in the women's school is we 0 to 10, are you fulfilled? 10 being very, extremely fulfilled, and 0 being unfulfilled. And then we go into the different parts of the woman's arena, which we talk about the wheel. Wheel is about becoming a whole version of ourselves. Why? Because we need to pay attention to the different parts of ourselves, because so many women today are unfulfilled, and especially mothers, because they think they're doing everything that they can as a mother, and they're pouring their heart to their child, but they're not paying attention to their marriages. They're not paying attention to their friendship. They're not paying attention to their self-image or their home environment or their wealth, which is not just, by the way, money. And so what they realize, well, I think I'm fulfilled, but there's something that's missing in my life, because we haven't created the distinction in the different parts of our arena. So ask yourself, do you feel as though you are a mentally strong mother? And if not, ask yourself, what parts of me do feel unfulfilled? And if so, why am I unfulfilled? And I think we need to start asking questions of the root cause of our unfulfillment or mental health, so that we don't just kind of, skim the surface and heal sort of the symptoms and not really the root cause of our unfulfillment or mental health. It's a question that we need to ask ourselves if we truly desire to raise mentally strong children. Is that mentally strong children has to come from mentally strong parents? Now, it's not always the case, because I think that children can make their own choice when they grow up and say, you know what, my parents were not mentally strong, and not judging, but based on their circumstances, I'm going to change my ways. I'm going to do things differently. But it's something that we right now currently can do something about and say, you know what, maybe I've never imagined myself as a resiliently strong woman, but maybe I should consider doing something different to grow my ability to be a resilient mother for the sake of raising resilient children.
Can regulate their own emotions.
Let's ask ourselves, 0 to 10, how skilled, and I think skill is so important. Why? Because it means skill is the ability to do something well, right? Because we could just blame ourselves, I'm just not really good at regulating my emotion. Well, who taught you the skill of regulating your emotion? We first have to know how to do it and how to do it well. And then we develop the habit of regulating our emotion. In the women's school, we call it emotional command. Command of our emotions, which means that we don't suppress our emotion. We also don't indulge in them. We actually command our emotion. Our mind can be stronger than our emotion, and we can will it towards its highest good. We are not a victim of our own emotions, which we are swimming in our culture where emotions Now we're changing laws. How we feel is becoming the basis of changing the infrastructure in our society. And we have to ask ourselves, how can we create a sustainable model of society that's rooted in emotion? But it begins with us asking ourselves, how strong are we emotionally that we're not allowing our emotion to actually rule our home, rule ourselves? So 0 to 10, your level of emotional command, 10 being you are in command of your emotion, you're not a victim to hard day or something came up and you just wallow all day, you're able to command your emotion and will it and not sit in it and not kind of marinate in this sort of negative state of emotion. You allow yourself to feel this frustration, right? But you're not a victim of it. For example, your toddler is screaming and they're toddlers. They need something, they don't know how to communicate. And so instead of being in command of your emotions, okay, toddlers scream. There's something that must be not right. They might need a nap. They might need food. What is it? What are they trying to communicate to me? We then allow our toddlers tantrum or frustration to emotionally hijack us. And then we can't think of the solution. And instead of us being in command of that situation where our toddlers, we are thrown off. We don't have command of our emotion and our day. And then it becomes a ripple impact. And then if you've got a toddler and then you've got maybe a 5-year-old or a 10-year-old, a teenager, then you're so hijacked because emotionally you can't think logically when you're hijacked emotionally because you start to get anxious or your toddler is crying. And then you're not paying attention to your 6-year-old and the needs of your 6-year-old, maybe to what they need in terms of from you, maybe more love or more attention or more nourishment or more training. Because when we're hijacked, it's not the time for us to think creatively about things that the world needs. We actually become selfish. Why? Because we're consumed with our emotion. It literally feels like being chased by a lion in our brain. So if we are not in command of our emotion and we allow external circumstances such as a toddler or a teenager that's not very respectful to make us ruin our day, then our life is going to be sort of a roller coaster. Now, emotional command also requires us to 0 to 10, how well can we manage our mind? 0 to 10, 10 being we are able to command our will, our thoughts to think of what's right, of what's solution or strategy, or we just allow our thoughts to go haywire. Oh my gosh, it was awful. And you just go thinking of all the worst case scenarios as opposed to maybe thinking, well, okay, toddlers cry. What's the solution here? How can I help my child? And think logically and not allow it to ruin my day or ruin anybody else's day, right? And really think about his needs. And that is us commanding our thoughts to override our emotion. And that's a skill in itself. Number 3, the skill of recalibrating. Throughout our day, things don't always work out the way as planned, whether it's at work, whether it's at home. We have this sort of plan. Do we get thrown off when we're late for traffic and our plan has to go out the door? Are we just sort of throwing the towel and say, well, that was, I did, it was awful, it was horrible. It's sort of a lack of ability to say, well, life is happening for me. I've got to recalibrate. Let's figure out a new solution, new strategy. It's not working out. And we've got to pivot. And children, I love you, but now we have to pivot. We can't go to the park or, we can no longer do the things that we do. We'll do it another day. I'm sorry. I love you, but we can't also just allow our children to hijack, because things are not working out. They have to learn to also self-regulate when things don't work out the way they want it. Now, obviously, that's a skill that they are not going to know overnight. It's a skill that we as mothers have to continually communicate to them and say, and model for them and say, I want to go too, right? Be empathetic. I want to go too. And it totally didn't work out. But you know what? I love you. And we're going to create another plan. But right now we have to recalibrate. And they should know that word. I mean, depending obviously on their age, if they're a toddler, they're not going to know that. But, my 8-year-old knows how to recalibrate as a word. So I think that's an important skill to say, okay, 0 to 10, how quick are you to recalibrate when things don't work out? And recalibrating is sort of creating a new solution. Pivot, and the woman's school, is our ability to reset expectation. So that's a skill in itself. And to be able to communicate that effectively and resetting our expectation is being able to say, well, I have to reset my expectation. I had all these great plans to go to the beach, but beloved children of mine, husband of mine, boss of mine, we've got to pivot right now because it's not looking like because of traffic or circumstances. But you know what? It's just another day in paradise. This is beyond my control. I did the best that I could. And you know what? I'm going to make it better next time. Maybe leave a little earlier. But let's find the good in the situation. That's our ability to be in command of our emotion. But think about it. That situation could happen in a matter of 30 seconds, right? Let's just say your child, you said you're not going to the park anymore, your child screams, throws a tantrum. In that moment, you've had to develop emotional command, mind management, recalibrate expectation, pivot into a new strategy, and also learn how to empathize. That in that 30-second, we need 5 skills. Just think about that, right? If you think about in that moment where you were planning to go to the park and it didn't work out, and then your child is screaming, 30 seconds, 5 skills that you need in order to manage that circumstance. And the question I have to ask you, if you don't have those 5 skills, how can you truly become resilient? How can you be resilient when you feel like you're a victim to that circumstance? So let's play that out, right? That's happened. You say, you know what? Life is happening for me. Obviously, there's a better plan that's happening. God must have a different plan. Your children is screaming. You say, I know, honey. I love you, but it's just not working out. We're going to do another plan. I need you to pivot with me. Let's create a new strategy. I'm going to reset your expectation. You know what? Let's reset expectation and let's find something closer because that park was too far, and let's make the best out of it. And we're going to have fun no matter what. That could all happen in a minute. 5 skills in a minute. Just think about what mothers need to become resilient mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritual all throughout the day. Because this is all day. And then if you are a working mom, that happens the same thing at work. To be able to pivot when things don't work out. When your boss says, we need a pivot strategy. How do you react? These are all opportunities to grow in resilience. But the reality is that we have to learn it first before our children can actually learn it. We are that source. We are teachers. Mothers are teachers. We are the primary educators of our children morally, but also skill-based training, how to develop their mindset. We have to take ownership in that responsibility so that we can raise healthy adults that will flourish in the future, even though we might not have been given these skill set. We have to be aware that these are skills that our children need and to develop over and over again as they compound this skill, but also layer this skill year after year so that they develop strength with every circumstance that comes their way. Okay.
And are resilient to stress, and do not see their children as the problem.
Do not see their children as a problem. We think children as stress, and that's become such the narrative. How tragic for our children to feel, even though they don't have language for it, that they are the cause of the stress in their life, that they're the cause of you not being able to fulfill your dreams, instead of you owning your responsibility to manage your mind and your emotion and resilient level and ability to develop your skill of pivoting and recalibrating and managing your words. Instead of you taking responsibility, they are taking the grunt of the impact of your stress level. And guess what? They're going to mimic and inherit your inability to manage your mind and emotion, because where else are they going to learn it? It's so true. Even in my own house, I have 8 children, and my girls sometimes are like, Mom, it's that time of the month. I'm just more upset about things. And my response is, you don't have to be a victim to that time of the month. You're stronger than your hormones. Sure, your hormones are elevated, but you can manage yourself. You can manage your emotion. You can eat a little bit better. And when they start to kind of like grumpy because of, for whatever reason, I have to quickly recalibrate them and say, no, you don't get to poison the culture of the kitchen simply because you're incapable of managing your emotion right now. You've got to go upstairs and recalibrate. That's not an excuse for you to, ruin this room and bleed your negativity here. Go upstairs and recalibrate. And that quickly gets them into sort of the state of, okay, I don't have to be a victim to my own emotion. I better do better. Instead of being like, yeah, I know it's that time of the month and you're just emotional. And we wallow in our victimhood, unaware that it is actually raising weak children who make excuses for their emotional strength. It has to be something that we're aware of, because awareness is the first prison we free ourselves from.
Parents need to look deeply at themselves and their own past losses.
Parents have to look deeply into their own past losses. Who amongst us have not had a loss? I was raised in the Philippines my first 11 years, and I didn't, and my parents wanted to come to the United States. And so the only way to do that legally was to leave us for 5 years until they got their green card. So I didn't see my parents for 5 years straight. I spoke to them on the phone maybe once every twice a week because that I still remember this was, oh gosh, in the 80s, I suppose. I was, 7 to 11 years old. I didn't see my parents. I never resented them. I knew what they were doing. They were fighting for the American dream. I respected them so much for their sacrifice. I knew it was hard for them, but it was hard for me. I imagine not having somebody to go to. And so I, as a child, developed resilience because I had to rely on myself. I had to cry and feel the pain of not feeling like anybody was there for you. And I had aunts and uncles, and they were amazing, but they're not your parents. And they really did an amazing job to care for us. But people would say, oh, that's a traumatic experience. I was grateful. I'm grateful enough that experience actually what's built resilience in me to know, well, our parents are imperfect. They're doing the best that they can. It is up to us to reconcile with our traumatic experience and call it trauma or just part of the human experience and harvest the good from it. And so we do have to look back into some of the difficult circumstances in our life, and we all have them. And we do because we are imperfect human beings. And I love my children, that I would die for my children, but I can guarantee you I have loved them imperfectly in spite my desire to love them so perfectly and so purely. I fail all the time, causing them probably some, small traumatic experiences. And I want them to say, you know what, honey, my imperfection should be a source of your resilience. Mom, and you're going to do it one day too. And I tell my children, I said, one day your imperfection ought to be your children's capacity to grow in their own strength. I'm going to mess up, sweetie, and I'm not going to do things the way I want to do it or the way I think it's most honorable. I have temptations and weakness, but don't let my weakness rob you of your own strength. Make that a source of your own strength. We have to have this honest conversation with our children because we have this sort of false expectations of perfection that's just in our culture. It's embedded in our culture. And we are tiptoeing against our own failures and mistakes and thinking that perfection or raising these children that are just perfect adults is the goal. And I don't think that's the goal. I think raising children that are going to be resilient against the immoral temptation so that they can pursue their call to fulfill God's purpose for them is the goal, right? And sometimes that means that they have to walk in their own imperfection and experience the consequence of their own behavior, right? And I think that we make our children's behavior, achievement, part of our worth, or part of what makes us more or less valuable. We make our motherhood based on their success or lack thereof. And I think it's rooted, this is a different topic in itself, but I think it's rooted in our own lack of fulfillment and our own lack of purpose. And so we then project, right, our value to our children because we don't see our value as unconditional. We don't see our value because we've been so conditioned that what makes us valuable as human beings is what we call in the women's school poisonous P, your perfection, your performance, your production, your power, and your possession. And all that, your popularity has poisoned our ability to understand our worth. But that's a conversation itself. But that is all related in raising resilient children, because if we haven't resolved our ability to understand our value as mothers and heal some of the traumatic experience and understand our values unconditional, then our children will inevitably inherit some of the traumatic experience that we've experienced simply because we haven't wrestled with them. What's the solution? Well, the solution is that we have to have training. Mothers are not necessarily born skilled. Just because we are born a woman, this doesn't mean we know how to be human. It doesn't mean we know how to be one. We make 25,000 decisions roughly a day. That doesn't mean we know how to make decisions. Indecision causes a lot of anxiety. We have 2 decades of education in our school infrastructure, and I don't think we teach decision-making skill. We don't even teach home economics before. I used to have home economics, and the idea of cause and effect, what you eat impacts how you feel, impacts your capacity to produce, quality results. We don't think about that anymore. It's sort of this idea that, we have expected perfection without preparation. And so we have to start really analyzing the root cause of a society that has, raised unfulfilled, entitled children and weak children what is the root cause of that? And to us in the women's school, in my opinion, it's because we're undertrained. We are underskilled, which is why we overwhelm. That's why overwhelm equals underskilled. And so every single time we have a roadblock, we have to ask ourselves, what skill do I need to build that is causing me to not heal my trauma and to also be mentally weak? Because it's not just also healing our trauma. And it's true, some traumas are really tragic, and I would not want to take that away from you. But I also think that some of our greatest our wounds can also become our greatest contribution. It has been true for me. We just need to know how to actually use our pain as a source of contribution, which requires skill after skill after skill. And that is what I want to challenge us is what skills do we need to build greater confident children so that they actually can become responsible citizens. So I'm going to finish this so that I'm going to end because I think
and traumas and take responsibility for their children's mental health rather than blaming something outside of themselves. The goal of raising healthy, resilient children.
Take responsibility for our children's mental health. Isn't that amazing? Instead of saying, well, there's got to be some outside experiences or something, we say, you know what can I do as a mother to build my own mental health to support my child's mental health? That's the question that we have to ask ourselves. The question of responsibility has to be that I'm responsible ultimately, and there's something that I lack. And what is that? So that I can then find the solution. And the solution is often that we have to grow. The solution is often that there's humility that is required of us mothers to equip our children better. And I think that we have to start thinking this way.
Is bipartisan, apolitical, and indivisible, and one that is achievable and attainable. In the wise words of C.S. Lewis, our children are not a distraction from more important work. They are the most important work. Children need.
I just love that from C.S. Lewis, is that our children are most important work. Now, we are living in a time in our culture where women are demanded not only in our home, but also outside of our home, that there is equal opportunity out there in the marketplace for us to also contribute our talents to the world. And I think that it's actually necessary. I think that women's voices, especially mothers, should be in politics, we should be teachers and nurses. I think that there is a call for that. Now, how do we resolve this in context of our own motherhood? Well, I think that we are living in a time where we can actually do that a little bit better than our parents because Zoom is available, there's remote work. So I think that there is more opportunities now that we should be grateful for, that we can actually do both. The things that my mother could not do to build, to fulfill, sort of make ends meet, and my parents are not the same. Our opportunities are different. I'm building a business, I'm building a school, and we are in 40 plus countries and we have thousands of students across the globe. And honestly, I have not done a lot of traveling because I had 2 babies as soon as I launched the women's school. And that's only possible because of the state of our culture. And so we have to see our call and our purpose is in context of today's infrastructure. I think God designed it that way. We are called for such a time as this. So what we need to do is to think, how can we become resilient mothers in context of our time? How can we raise resilient children and be fully present to our children? And I think the best place to start is, number one, we have to study ourselves. We have to ask hard questions and say, have I healed from past trauma? If not, what am I doing to actually build the right skill set to heal from it? Because it's not, we go to counseling and we have a lot of therapists in our schools that use our program, both for themselves, but also actually for their clients. And I think what's missing in our culture is that therapy is essential to unblock, right? Because we want to be able to unblock some of this traumatic experience and see it in a way that gives us hope. But ultimately, we're going to need to build skill sets such as emotional command, mind management skills, routine, or communicating our boundaries effectively, recalibrating, hundreds and hundreds of skills that we teach in the women's school, because we can unblock it, but then we don't know how to live it. And if we are going to raise mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually strong children, they have to be equipped with the skills necessary to not just know it intellectually, but incarnate these skill set and intuitively live it from knowing to being. We take what we know, information, we form our mindset and develop our skill set so we can form our bodies to a life of excellence, right? Mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually, not just our bodies, but our whole integrated being, so that we can give to our children the best of who we are, to live that life of excellence. And I think that's, to me, is the root cause of a lot of frustration in our culture, is simply that we are void of the skills. We can't even live a virtuous life or a moral life because we don't know how to process cause and effect. We don't know how to manage our emotion and our mind. And we are, especially as Christian women, we're told, well, be charitable. Well, what does that look like in our tonality? If we are called to be charitable and we don't understand that only 7% of our words and 38%, 55% is our communication, our tonality, 7% words, 38% tonality, and 55% body language. And we are told, be charitable, and we don't understand that communicating our charity is 7, 30, and 55%. We could be robbing ourselves of being charitable simply because we lack the training of foundational effective communication skills. It's just a skill, right? And I think that it's important for us to give women hope, especially mothers, that resilience is possible, that healing ourselves is possible if we give ourselves skills and tools. Number 2, we need to start studying our children, because that is how we can serve them at the highest level. We can't love our children unless we know our children. What are their weaknesses? What are their strengths? What do they want? What do they not want? What do they need in this particular moment? With 8 children, I'm always sort of studying them and say, you know what, this child right now needs really to hound on honesty. This little lady or this little son of mine, and knowing the skill of how to be honest. Let me give you an example. One of my littles was working on honesty, and they have, when you understand the development of a child, at a certain age, between, I think, 3 to 6, they have a difficult time understanding reality with fantasy. And so I think because of that, sometimes they make up things and they elaborate things. So I was teaching one of my child what honesty looks like. And so I was, we were developing the scripts, and she was writing hundreds of scripts, because we want to be able to make sure that honesty is a foundation. However, I tell the truth. I'm honest all the time. We have script writing in our home. But a friend of hers, and so anyway, she had to recalibrate and reset this week, and she couldn't go out with friends. And so she was at Mass with my older daughter, and her friend came up and said, oh, can you come to my house? And she knew she was not allowed to because she was in recalibration week, but she said, sure. And I thought to myself, okay, I worked on her capacity to be honest and really develop neurologically. There's wirings in her brain, to be honest, and that she knows the script of how to be truthful and how to really kind of be honest no matter what. But I realized she needs the skill of learning how to say no to a friend who's asked her, and to do what she's supposed to do, what is right, and not feel bad. And so now I'm working on her capacity to say no and to do what is honorable, right? Because she said, Mom, I just didn't know how to say no to her. So it felt like she was defiant, but she said, I just didn't know how to say no to my friend. I felt bad saying no to her. And she's young, because she was asking me to go to her house, and we live kind of in this neighborhood that she can. And I was doing filming, and my older daughter was watching her. What's my point? My point is I have to study my children's needs. What skill do they need? What training do they need? And every child's different. Like I had a child that we were having a discussion and say, how can I equip you in your faith more? How can I equip you in your moral development as you continue to go out to the world because you're older? And we're having a great discussion about it. One of my child, needs emotional command. And so one of my child needs a skill of putting things back, putting things away right away. One of my children needs a skill of zipping things, because we want to be able to create order in our home. And one of the things that I am on my children is that open and shut. So my point in saying this is that we have to study our children and their needs. And if we don't have the mental and emotional command and mental health, how can we study our children if we're just stressed and hijacked? And what I want to tell you is that there's hope, because these are just skills that the strong, resilient woman and mother that you want to become, and the strong, resilient child that you want to have, is simply a matter of giving them the right tools. This is why I'm so convicted in the women's school and building a school for women to teach mindset and skill-based training, because I think that is a problem with our culture. That's obviously my opinion. I'm obviously very passionate about a school that teaches women how to be human. And to me, it is the lens in which I see most things. The suffering that often our children have endured is simply because they lack the training. So that's what I think, is that we want to study our children. Number three, we also want to be vigilant in our children's capacity to develop skill set and competence that leads to confidence. We want to raise confident children. Why? Because that's going to be the ammunition that we need to be resistant against negative influences. Confident children who know their value comes from competence. If your children knows how to manage their mind, manage their emotion, develop a routine, you know how to recalibrate, you know how to communicate effectively, say no to herself, she's going to be more confident. And that same confidence is what she's going to need to become resilient against negative temptations. So we have to be really I would say intentional about raising confident children that's rooted in competence, not in production, not in what they can, their popularity, what we call the poisonous P in the woman's school. It poisons their self-worth when we make their value based on popularity, production, power, possession, and perfection. To me, that is a false narrative of confidence that we have pummeled in our culture, and it's a false, I would say, ideology that children are aspiring for. Instead of rooting confidence that's rooted in competence, which means skill building has to be something that is part of our home life. And finally, I think that we have to create a culture in our home where the reason why we're studying ourselves and studying our children to be mentally resilient is so that we can live a life of meaning and contribution. Why? Because that's what's going to give them true fulfillment, is to give of ourselves. But how can we give of ourselves when we are ourselves depleted? And so true fulfillment is through living a life of generosity and contribution. So by equipping them to be mentally resilient with compounding skills, we equip them to fulfill their divine purpose, which is to give more of themselves, whatever that looks like in the particular season of their life. So it's multi-purpose. If you think about the necessity of skill building as women, is that it's really to not fulfill only our call, but it's to fulfill our call as mothers, and then create a legacy of also our children fulfilling their divine call. Because ultimately what we want is to have our children say, God say to our children, well done, my good and faithful servant. You have done what I have commissioned you to do, that you have fulfilled the will. But how do we do that if our will isn't formed? How do we do that if our mindset or we lack the training? And so to me, training is the antidote to actually weakness. And we are living in a culture that is pummeled with weak leadership. And what we need to do is raise strong children that are going to become strong adults and going to become strong leaders, so that we can together rebuild a flourishing culture. If you like what you heard here, and if you are interested in mindset and skill-based training and to grow together as women, to study ourselves and to study with each other so that we can become better teachers to our children, join the Women's School and learn more how you can be part of our classroom and have accountability to grow skill after skill after skill and fulfill your divine purpose and become a contribution towards truth, beauty, and goodness. My name is January Donovan, founder of the Women's School. Remember that you were created for such a time as this. Go fulfill your purpose, because what you offer this world, no woman can.